It's May 27, 2019, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them up. Number 1. Accurately described hate group sues for defamation. Members of the violent white nationalist group, the Proud Boys, gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial last week to announce that they are suing the Southern Poverty Law Center, one of the most formidable and consequential civil rights organizations in the country, for defamation over the SPLC branding them a hate group. If you go to the page on the SPLC's website dedicated to the Proud Boys, I think you'll find it makes a pretty convincing case for the hate group designation. But of course, there are two sides to every story. The Proud Boys have a rebuttal to the SPLC accusing them of being a hate group, and that rebuttal can best be summarized as, "Nuh-uh, shut up." Judging by the page on their website, the SPLC's designation of the Proud Boys as a hate group is based on the words and actions of members of the Proud Boys, particularly founder Gavin McInnes, who has since left the group and is also suing the SPLC for defamation. The SPLC documents numerous statements by McInnes that are racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, misogynist, transphobic. The SPLC also describes how the stated ideology of the Proud Boys, which they frame as pro-Western rather than explicitly white nationalist, is largely indistinguishable from other, more overt racist far-right groups. The SPLC's page also notes that trying to recategorize themselves as something less offensive while continuing to associate with avowed white nationalists is something the Proud Boys do. It's also something other hate groups do, and have done for decades. Back in the 70s, David Duke was insisting that the Ku Klux Klan wasn't anti-black, but merely pro-white. The SPLC also notes the Proud Boys' history of violence, something the group's leaders have actively encouraged, quoting an interview where McInnes explains that in order to become a fourth-degree Proud Boy, which is a thing that exists, one must get beat up, or kick the crap out of an Antifa. Again, the Proud Boys' rebuttal to all of this isn't to claim that McInnes never said these things, or that members of the group haven't been arrested for assault. Instead, the only evidence they offer to discredit the description of them as a hate group is their own insistence that they aren't one. Something tells me that's not going to hold up in court. Though, these days, who the hell can say? Number 2, Ohio legislator proposes forward-looking anti-abortion bill. Not content to merely ban most abortions, Republicans in Ohio are also pushing to prohibit insurance companies in the state from covering abortion services. Seems like an oddly redundant measure. If you've already said abortion is illegal, doesn't that kind of settle the issue of whether or not it can be insured already? Whatever. It's another provision of the bill that I want to focus on here. The bill in question is HB 182, introduced into the Ohio House of Representatives last month by Republican Representative John Becker. It includes an exception to its ban on insurance coverage for abortion procedures, quote, "a procedure for an ectopic pregnancy that is intended to re-implant the fertilized ovum into the pregnant woman's uterus." The thing is, no such procedure exists, nor is it likely to in the near future. As Dr. Daniel Grossman, director of the Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health Research Group at UC San Francisco, explained on Twitter earlier this month, ectopic pregnancies can endanger the life of the pregnant person, and treatments focus on allowing people who have them to retain their fertility in order to try again another time. It just isn't possible to re-implant an ectopic pregnancy into the uterus. Representative Becker wrote an op-ed defending the ectopic exception in his bill as forward-looking, which I suppose is one way to look at it. Maybe he should add an amendment clarifying that teleporting a live fetus out of the uterus is also a permitted procedure. You know, just to make sure we have our bases covered and we don't have to revisit this law in a mere couple of centuries. This is the ass-backward, upside-down world we're living in. where legislators are trying to ban insurance coverage of medical procedures that are real and very much wanted and necessary, while making sure to write in loopholes for procedures that don't even exist. Nice to see the priorities of the so-called pro-life movement are just as warped and irrational as they've ever been. Number 3, Trump administration prepares to rescind healthcare protections for trans people. Last week, the Department of Health and Human Services proposed a rule change that could threaten the ability of trans people to access necessary health care. The change would overturn an Obama-era guideline that ensures that legal protections against sex-based discrimination also apply to trans people. The new rule would apply regulations against sex-based discrimination according to what the director of the HHS Office for Civil Rights calls the plain meaning of the term. The term being sex, meaning trans people would be treated as the gender they were assigned at birth rather than the gender they actually are. Defenders of the rule change, like Emily Cow of the Heritage Foundation, argue that applying protections against sex discrimination to trans people could lead to doctors being forced to perform gender reassignment surgery. Except, 1, that's ridiculous, and 2, the current rule, which protects trans people from discrimination, was established in 2012. Have any doctors been forced to perform gender reassignment surgery since then? Don't most doctors who perform GRS kinda specialize in that sort of thing? How is forcing a doctor to perform GRS even supposed to work? Do these assholes even know what they're afraid of? I don't think so. Trans people concerned about this rule change know exactly what they're afraid of, on the other hand, because they have to live with it every day. For many trans people, those ever-present fears have been amplified these last few years as they've watched the Trump administration systematically dismantle what few legal protections they had. There's the trans military ban, another pending rule change at the Department of Housing and Urban Development that could threaten trans people's access to homeless shelters, and now this effort to deny trans people equal protection from discrimination in healthcare. Here's the deal, fellow cis-hetero folks. Actually, screw it. I'm going to turn the camera on for this bit. And you know what? This goes double for the atheist skeptic community, which has recently seen some of its most popular and influential voices close ranks around someone who made a transphobic video and then threw a tantrum and victim played when he was called out for it. We can either stand with trans people or we can stand with those who are harming trans people. We can't do both. If you want to stand with those who are spreading ignorance and transphobia, or maybe not even stand with them, maybe sit and share beers and a nice chummy chat, then you're not standing with trans people, and I can't and won't stand with you. And that doesn't just go for my fellow atheists, of course, and it doesn't just go for trans folks. It goes for everyone. Stand with marginalized people against those who want to hurt them, or keep the hell away from me. Because we're not going to be friends. Number 4, Trump unveils new immigration plan as more migrant children die in U.S. custody. Because why stop with people who might get pregnant and trans folk? We gotta put the screws to people fleeing violence and poverty too, right? Week before last, Trump announced his proposed immigration plan, which would replace the current system with a points-based system that could result in millions of people who have already spent years waiting to obtain a green card being essentially kicked out of line. The proposed system would also require people to learn English and pass a U.S. civics exam before they even apply for a green card. Currently, those are requirements for citizenship, not residency. Besides those proposed changes, the administration apparently intends to continue its practice of denying large numbers of applications for highly skilled worker visas and student visas, and to make it more difficult for holders of highly skilled worker visas to bring their spouses into the country. As an article about the Trump immigration plan on Forbes.com summarizes it, quote, The White House immigration plan proposes to continue preventing high-skilled foreign nationals from working in the United States on H-1B visas, eliminate the immigration applications of more than 4 million people waiting in family and employment backlogs, introduce extraneous green card requirements for workers, and tell professionals who gain permanent residence they may need to wait 5 to 7 years before their spouse can live with them in America, unquote. Trump has been shouting about how the country is full for months now, and in a sense I agree with him. The United States is full of ignorant, intolerant jackasses like Trump who see immigrants, documented and undocumented, as a threat rather than a resource, and view allowing immigrants and refugees into the country as a burden rather than a responsibility. By the way, a few days after Trump announced his immigration plan, an unaccompanied teenage boy from Guatemala died in U.S. Customs and Border Protection custody. According to the Washington Post, he is the 5th migrant child to die in U.S. custody at the southern border since December. He wasn't sent to a hospital, despite complaining that he wasn't feeling well, and he was held in CBP custody for a week, despite the law requiring that unaccompanied minors be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services within 3 days of being apprehended. According to the Washington Post, the FBI is investigating the teenager's death. I have an idea who they should arrest. Speaking of whom, now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. He welcomed the authoritarian anti-Semitic Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, to the White House, claiming that Orban is respected all over Europe, he didn't say by who, and that Orban is, quote, like me, a bit controversial, but that's okay. Yeah, no, that's definitely not okay. He pitched the trade war he started with China to the American farmers who will be the most hurt by it by appealing to their patriotism. Hey, isn't there like a whole category of politicians who try to sell the public on irrational and harmful policies by calling on them to make unnecessary and easily avoidable sacrifices for the sake of their country? What are they called? Is it fastbacks? Fastits? I can't think of it. He issued a memo giving Attorney General Bill Barr the authority to declassify intelligence secrets related to the Russia investigation, a political appointee loyal to a corrupt president given the power to decide which classified information related to an investigation of that president the public is allowed to see. How could that possibly go wrong? He invoked emergency powers to approve deals to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, deals which Congress has been blocking due to concerns about the ongoing Saudi-led military intervention in Yemen and the generally horrific human rights record of the Saudis, exemplified recently by the state-sanctioned murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi last year and the mass execution of 37 people carried out just last month. And he ended a planned meeting with congressional Democrats after Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi said he was engaged in a cover-up. Trump announced that he won't work with Democrats as long as they continued to investigate him and his administration. After the canceled meeting, he held a hastily organized press conference where he declared with a shamelessness that would be hilarious if there weren't so much at stake that he doesn't do cover-ups. The next day, after several people described his cancellation of the meeting as a temper tantrum, Trump derailed a public event that was supposed to be about meeting with farmers, the ones he's demanding patriotic sacrifices from, and paraded nearly a half-dozen members of his staff before the press, each of whom insisted that he had been very calm during his interaction with the Democrats. He went on to declare himself, not for the first time, to be a very stable genius. Then, a reporter brought up how Trump has been freely accusing his political opponents of treason for, investigating the many crimes he's obviously committed. The reporter reminded Trump that treason is punishable by death and asked him who specifically he was accusing of treason. And Trump, the President of the United States, without skipping a beat, without taking a moment to consider the gravity of what he was about to say, rattled off a list of people he doesn't like for various reasons. People like James Comey and Andrew McCabe, none of whom have committed treason, and even described some of the supposedly treasonous things they've done, none of which are remotely treasonous. Investigating someone you suspect of having committed a crime isn't treason, even if the suspect is the President of the United States. Treason is disloyalty to your country. Seems like investigating a dangerous, incompetent, corrupt criminal who holds the most powerful office in the government is precisely the sort of thing someone loyal to their country should do. And I'm glad people are doing it. I just wish they would hurry the hell up. That's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Hey folks, hope you got something out of this one. If you did, please click like, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not subbed already, and please consider helping me to keep making videos like this by supporting this channel with a monthly donation through Patreon. You can go to www.patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron for as little as $1 a month, but if you can afford it and you think I'm worth it and you pledge $5 a month or more, you get yourself a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5, just like these folks, my newest $5 or more per month patrons. And their names are Traskus, thank you Traskus, James, thank you James, Rob Sampson, thank you Rob, Cousin Vinny, thank you Cousin Vinny, Blue Eyeshadow is Logical, thank you Blue Eyeshadow is Logical, Drace Domino, thank you Drace, David Wilensky, thank you David, Matthew Maeda, thank you Matthew, Saint Swibbins, thank you Saint Swibbins, Joe Culver, thank you Joe, Ian Stewart, thank you Ian, Kayla Powell, thank you Kayla, and Joshua Selig. Thanks to everyone whose name I just said. Thanks to all of you who are patrons at whatever level you're pledging for however long you've been pledging. I literally could not do this without you. You make this work, and indeed my whole life as it currently exists possible. I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate all the rest of you for watching, for liking and sharing, and doing all the free stuff to support the channel. I couldn't do it without you either. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.